bus. Yeah.
How are you doing today?
Not too bad.
Would you like to be interviewed?
Sure.
Alright, it's May 14, 2012. This is Justicedonedirtcheap interviewing John. How are you doing today? Again.
Not too bad.
Alright, would you like to share your views on bylaw issues, considering that you're aware that I filed a charter challenge to try to strike down the City of Fredericton bylaw for riding on the sidewalk with a bicycle. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's really important. I mean, we were talking about this. I think it's really important to find out what's going on at the heart of this, at the center of this. Why this thing is a law? Is it a law?
Yes.
Is it legitimate? How it developed, how it evolved.
Yes.
And maybe its development and its evolution are questionable. And if they are, then challenging the existence of it is, I think, a good thing. And I mean, I'm not to draw analogies. I'm not. It's crazy. But anything that's taken as self-evident without thinking, okay, well, here's the situation. This is what we do with African Americans. This is the way we treat them. Well, why do we do this?
Yes.
Because of something that didn't exist before and exists now, and somehow is arbitrary and mandatory without question.
See, if one thinks back 100 years ago, no one had to ask permission to get from point A to point B, and what has changed between then and now? As adult men and women, we can still decide to go from point A to point B without a registration, without a license, without all those extra things. And not to broaden the topic too much, but just coming back to the bylaw issue, what's interesting is that the bylaw that the City of Fredericton has is called T4 Section 15, and it says that no one shall be on the sidewalk with a motorcycle or a bicycle,
right,
unless they're just crossing it to get to the other side.
Right.
And the broad language is so broad that how could they possibly realistically combine motorcycles and bicycles together?
Yes.
That's illogical.
To conflate the two, yes.
Yes, and then besides that, just being on the sidewalk with a bicycle can give you a $50 to $500 fine. There's no actual language for dangerous behavior or someone whose rights are being violated by just being on the sidewalk. If the language was actually clear and said, if someone is actually riding on the sidewalk, endangering others by reckless behavior with a bicycle,
right,
and they're endangering pedestrians by their behavior, then that language would make sense. But right now it doesn't. The actual term is overbreath.
Right.
It's so broad, how do you apply it?
Yes, and it seems to stem, I mean, to go back to the original question, I mean, 100 years ago, and then people say, well, things have to change. You know, this is always the argument, you know, things have to change, and then you say, well, yeah, but then, you know, you say, okay, and I'm not going to draw such, you know, obscene analogies, but something used to be called rape, and it's called love now, because love has to change into that doesn't necessarily mean it's a change for the good. So, okay, not every change is a change for the better. Why did it change? And some people will say, well, it changed because there was chaos in the street, and there was all kinds of anarchy or perceived, you know,
yes,
accidents and injuries. And if that wasn't the case, it seems to me often the case that a lack of, I mean, these are issues that people talked about, you know, back in the 19th century, the Romantics, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Karl Marx, alienation, all these sorts of things. It seems to be more dependent upon, I have to be known, I have to be seen.
Yes.
In other words, back in the day, you didn't have to advertise,
yes,
by having a license or proving yourself.
Yes.
I mean, I went one time when I was trying to get a hunter safety permit.
Yes.
Now, this is a bad example, but I was in a room with a bunch of other very seasoned hunters,
yes,
who had spent years,
yes,
decades in the woods, much older than I was. I committed there with a hunter safety permit. Many of them did not.
Yes.
Simply because they were less literate,
yes,
than I was. They were able to I was able to pass a test. They weren't. I felt guilty. I felt ashamed because I had the thing I could wear as a label, a license.
Yes.
It seems to be more about the insecurity of that, because in a more secure, self-reliant, I mean, you know, we trust ourselves. I don't need an X-ray. I don't need to show you what I ate for dinner today.
Yes.
So I think it has more to do with that, and it manifests itself in things like driver's license. And someone else would say, look, I'm perfectly okay to be able to kind of police myself in this situation.
To manage your own
yes,
affairs and to do what's correct in the situation, yes, based on your judgment as a man, as an adult man, being intelligent. You should have the choice to do one thing or the other.
Well, you don't. It's about wearing your status on your sleeve. I
yes,
suppose without a driver's license, and look, I'm not arguing against them. But without these things, you can't say, here's my trophy, here's my thing.
Yes.
People just have to take you day to day.
Yes.
So how you drive, how you comport yourself from point A to point B. Not to assume that I'm better than you are simply because I have a license.
Yes.
Let's see over the course of time how you comport yourself, I comport yourself, rather than saying I'm better than you because I go to church, because I have a degree, because I have a license. It really kind of diminishes, I think, real quality.
If I can draw a parallel there, a license does not a good driver make.
Exactly, any more than a churchgoer does a good Christian make.
Yeah.
You know, as Jesus says, if you must pray, then pray in your closet. Don't go into the synagogue like the hypocrites.
Yes.
I feel like you have to advertise your virtue.
Yes.
So a lot of it has to do with that. The perceived need to advertise your virtue as a result of insecurity. Once you get the public involved in that, they're willing to be part of that status, literal proverbial status quo.
Yes.
It is status.
Yes.
They give up their individual
right
liberty.
to choose.
Yes.
Or the right to choose.
The power they gain from that kind of status. And of course, that's going to unintentionally and accidentally marginalize people who still have the capacity to go out and do things without having to advertise their virtues on their sleeve. So those people, precisely like the people you're talking about, who are often, they're not always good people, but sometimes they're simply people who do not need to advertise these things. I'm good because I wear a helmet. I'm good because I don't drive on the sidewalk. Other people, I'm not saying I'm one, are secure enough in themselves not to have to advertise these things.
Yes.
But those people are punished as well as real dangerous people.
Yes.
Those people are thrown in the same group, just like motorcycles and bicycles, same thing. Someone who is careful but doesn't need to be advertising his or herself is not the same as someone who is dangerous.
Yes, and another point is, we can share the sidewalks as adults. We can share. We don't need to be told to share. We can actually share because it's a good thing to do. And most people I meet on the sidewalks, on the streets, walking, bicycling, doesn't matter. You're a pedestrian whether you have a bicycle between your legs or you don't. You're about the same size, going about the same speed, and we have the human connection where it's very easy to respect each other's space in that capacity. The difference being, on the road, a car has no personal connection with someone on the road. Because there's a big metal thing between you in a car and everything outside you. And
yes, and believe me, when I was in the room with those other hunters, I felt I had a big thing too.
Yes.
That was the car, and they felt, my God, I feel violated and humiliated because this person has an expression of power. So yeah, I agree completely. Often these things, like you say, 100 years ago, and I'm not going to romanticize because there was this racism, there was, you know, subjugation of women, the lack of women's rights, all kinds of things. But people will also say we used to go out and leave our doors unlocked.
Yes.
We used to walk down the street and we used to make eye contact. We used to be able to stand the sound of each other's voices. Now we text. Now we email. We do all of these sorts of things. It seems, again, all of these things, whatever utilitarian benefit they serve as a means of producing money, they ultimately facilitate putting walls between people.
Yes.
You know, because I'm better than you, because I have this piece of paper.
Yes.
Someone who teaches and has gone to university, I know what that trap is like.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You've got all these degrees, and suddenly you are these things, get out of my way.
Yes.
And you get to feel like you can put people in their places. I mean...
So there's a difference between academic prowess and real world interactions.
Yes.
Someone might be academically a genius, but in the real world have a very difficult time communicating the most basic concepts.
Absolutely, yes. That's the thing, and that thing, often that's often the case. We put more emphasis on the outside than what's on the inside.
Yes.
I mean, but what's really in our heart of hearts, who we really are, in our closets. As opposed to who we are.
As opposed to the pieces of paper that might hang on our wall.
Yeah, and these things, to go back to what you're saying, often involve participating in things that hurt other people.
Yes.
Because they marginalize other people.
Yes.
They turn things that are anomalies, aren't anomalies really, or weren't 100 years ago, into anomalies, therefore into perceived criminal activities, therefore into things that should be punished. Because somebody has the audacity to go from point A to point B without needing to have a certificate.
Yes.
To do so.
Yes.
That's sort of, I guess, bureaucracy, and that sort of turning the other into an abstraction is something we like to think. 100 years ago, people used to do that. We don't do that anymore.
Yes.
Sure we do. sure we do.
And the thing is that 100 years ago and today, we are still men and women who come out of our mothers. We put our pants on one leg at a time. We're not traveling in flying cars.
No.
So people need to get a grip on the fact that basic freedoms of choice do not have to be reflected by our surroundings. As in, as a man, you should be able to choose option A, B, or C.
Yes.
There should not be the restriction on your choice based on someone else's academic idea of what is safest in your, or what are the safest choices for you. Like, just as an example myself, I believe I should be able to choose whether to travel by the sidewalk or by the road, on the side of the road, on the grass if I need to, whatever is the safest path for me, because I'm responsible for my own safety.
Right.
And if my choices are basically going to result in me getting hurt or not. So how can somebody in some government agency somewhere write a piece of paper and then claim that that has power over me when I do not consent to it?
Yes.
See, where do they get their power?
And it assumes the worst. I think, for me, it always goes back to these things. It's not really my right, so much as that there should be some responsibility felt among us.
Yes.
To serve as, or to try to serve as examples of people who occasionally make up their own minds.
Yes.
A culture in which we advertise and brag about not making up our own minds is to have a culture of no examples of people saying, look, I can make up my own mind. That's we would have said 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, that's totalitarianism.
Yes.
That's not what we call it anymore. We call it progress.
It's been relabeled.
Yeah, just like love. Yeah, it's rape. No, it's not. You know, rape is love. No, it's not. It's rape. Something that is that without the allowance of an example, not to prove a point. I know how to make up my own mind, but that we really outlaw that, and therefore, what kind of examples do we serve to children in the future if we just kind of give up?
Yes.
And say, the government makes up my mind, science makes up my mind, police makes up my mind, religion makes up my mind, all of these, I make up my mind about everything. I'm spoon-fed. That's a bad example, I think.
I think we need to come back, we need to take our power back to self-direction, to be able to choose what's in our own best interest without just following the herd mentality and somehow feel guilty for making up our own choices and differentiating ourselves from others.
Yeah.
It's a simple concept that people almost seems foreign to people today in a country that boasts itself as being free, yet when one exercises their freedom, they're criticized by the group.
Yes.
For the individual, is it criticized by the group? It's very strange.
You used to call that, I mean, even up until recently, an eccentric. I mean, you'd be very lucky, I think, these days, as you know, to be simply called an eccentric.
Yes.
For having the audacity to think you have the capacity to make up your own mind.
Yes. Well, we'll leave it right there. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you, man.
Have a great day.